Hi, I'm Stephanie Rozzo. Welcome to Nature Sketch Crates. Go out and sketch a blue poison dart frog instructional video. In this video, I'll be showing you how to sketch a blue poison dart frog by applying what you learned in the step-by-step painting lesson. First, make sure you have all the materials you need before you go out to sketch. Today I'll be sketching from a composite video of a blue poison dart frog that I took at the Aquarium of the Pacific. Remember, this is just a sketch. Take your time, observe and paint. Don't let yourself get too caught up with accuracy. Just relax and have fun. So you want to apply what you know about blue poison dart frogs from the step-by-step lesson. You can also apply the little bit of information you learned from the A Little About Me sheet and kind of think about where you want it placed on the page. And I'm going to take up most of this page with this image of this frog. So I'm going to start by just kind of roughly drawing in the size. So just really quick, using a circle, and maybe just kind of roughly drawing in some circles and ovals for the legs, just to get an idea of the overall space that this frog is going to take. And it's going to change a bit from that. Once I have that mapped out on the page, I'll start to add some shapes to define each part of the frog. So the body's a pretty central part, so I'm going to start with that. And it's a bit of a hexagon. So I'll start with a line here on the side, little curve, and then here, 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 and here. It's simpler to think of everything as quick shapes that you can just kind of map in. Little oval for the leg. It's going to stay kind of there. And I'm going to keep this water dish or whatever it is that this frog is sitting on in the picture, just to give it a little bit of a sense of place. And go ahead and draw in, this is covering up part of this hexagon here, an oval. I'm using very light marks to draw these in. And if I make a mistake, I'm not going back and erasing any of these marks. I'm just going to draw darker marks to define them a little bit more later. When you're sketching from a live animal, it's best to go ahead and just work quickly. And this style of sketching allows for a lot of sketchy marks underneath. And you're just getting a study of this animal. So I'm adding in just some rough idea of where these toes are, and I'll redefine them a little bit later once I have the rest of the frog in. And I'm going to extend the back here, and then I have kind of a triangle here for the neck area, and it really extends. It's important to see this shape in here, this part as a shape, because it is showing some of the placement of where the eye is. And just kind of roughly draw in the basic space that the head is taking. And you can sit back and look and say, hey, is this a little bit too big? Is this a little bit too small? And I don't like it. I think it's a little bit too big. I'm going to step back. I'm going to redefine some of these things. I don't think I made the head big enough in relation to my body. So I'm going to readjust some of that stuff, and that's why we have these very light marks. I'm going to give myself a little bit more of a sense of what's going on here by adding in this eye. So again, just using really simple shapes and very light marks to get an idea of where things are. And it's not exact at all. I'm gonna just go through and define those a little bit better as we go. Frogs that aren't eating or not interacting with other frogs, or like this one is pretty still most of the time. Did composite the video a little bit more to make it a bit easier for you to see, but this frog didn't really move at all. I'm just adding in some of the toe pads. Again, nothing's exact. This is just a quick sketch to get an idea of this frog. And it looks pretty crazy right at the moment. So then I can start to add some parts of this frog to make it look more like a frog. And I like to start with the eye sometimes. I'm gonna do that. I feel like starting with the eye. And so draw that circle, the area under the eye, and then start to put in the front here. And the area above the eye. So mostly by adding these light marks was made sure that I didn't make my image bigger than my page. I'm able to fit the whole frog on there. And it's fine. Now I'm using these darker marks to kind of say, hey, this is where these are actually going to be the lines of this frog, or the outline of this frog. And I'm still using shapes to figure out the size. Wherever I can see a shape, I use that. To give myself an idea of where different parts of this frog will go. I'm going to add this spot because it's going to help me figure out where things are in relation to other things. So how far over then it should go for the leg and everything. Any kind of defining marks you can find. So the leg is a little bit too far over, it looks like. It looks like that's a little bit more of the chest there. And I initially drew in the leg. And that's totally fine. I'm just redefining it here a bit. And so we got a belly, it's more of a belly line there. Still, those marks helped define where my line should go. And they're totally different, but that doesn't mean I should be erasing them. Just keep going. Still think that this foot was in the right spot overall. Maybe you disagree the way I see it. The great thing about sketching is this is going to be your view of this animal, even if it's the same image and video that you're sketching from. It's still an individualized image. When you paint, it's going to look different from when I paint. Not because of experience, but because of you as an individual. And how you might see it a little bit differently than I do. And I think that this is a good landmark line here to indicate the size of the frog. I think the leg even comes out a little bit more over here. This leg here. And this is where I'm going to erase this because I'm going to get a little lost if I don't. So this leg, I think that this is in the right spot, and I know these are big because of this lower part of the leg is big because of our step-by-step, and it has this funny little knobby elbow here. But I think it's a little bit further this direction. And then belly goes here, and then I can start adding in the back hind leg. And I'm basing this shape based on where it meets this line from the belly. And this trunk area. And kind of goes up and then back out. And around, and I think I want to finish this side first. And so these toes were in the wrong spot, but like I said, that was just so that I had an idea of the size more than the exact location of those toes. It doesn't really matter initially. Sometimes if your animal is moving around too, you have to make up some of these things when you're sketching. And that's where knowing that the size of the different parts and not worrying too much about exact location comes in handy. It's great to create sketches in order to study the animal a little bit, especially in person, if possible. And really get a good idea of the animal more than you can from a video or a photo. And your observations will come through in that sketch. And you can use it later on to create images that are more detailed. And there's a big spot here, so I'm just going to assume a couple of those toe pads are up there, and I'm going to put this leg here, and I'm going to readjust this chest line one more time. Draw that. Might be a little off, but I'm not going to spend a bunch of time doing much. So these darker lines, I know that that's where my lines are, and those are the lines I'm going to rely on rather than these light lines here. Last thing I'm going to do is just add a few of these toe pads in, a little dark, so I'm just going to add it in. They look heart-shaped, so I'm going to go with that. Really quickly adding these in. And then I'm going to add a little eye highlight mark, so where the light's hitting, so that I remember to leave that white later. And then lastly, I'm going to add a bunch of spots. At any point while you're drawing, it's probably best to do afterwards, but you can add in observations in the white areas of how you're feeling, what your environment's like, what you learned, whatever you like. This is your sketchbook, so make it yours. Just defining the eye a little bit, the shape of the eye a little bit more, so that when I paint it, I get it into the right spot. And then I'm going to continue to add these spots. Each frog has its own individual spot pattern. This is just a sketch, so I'm not too worried about getting the spots in exact the right spot or the exact right size. And I drew in this spot earlier. It's a little bit big. I'm gonna get a little bit smaller. I'm finding it easy to just kind of draw these in completely rather than out drawing little circles. It's easier to start in a space and then work out to create that shape for the spot. It is for me at least. And it's good for you to find out what kind of technique works best for you, but that might be helpful. These spots, again, I'm not getting them exactly right. I'm just kind of getting them down real quick, because if this animal was in person and moving, I would need to make sure I got this quickly. Although when I observed this frog at the aquarium, it did not move at all. But there was a frog behind it, moving around quite a bit. But it's best for practice just to get this down quickly. Got the shape of the leg wrong a little bit there, so I just adjusted that real quick without erasing. Don't worry about the shape of the belly too much, the trunk area. And I think that this part's a little bit more narrow. And I'm going to erase that line just so I don't get confused later. I'm finding it a little bit confusing. That's the only time you really should be erasing those lines. And obviously not exact, but close enough. I can make this part a little bit bigger. And it's okay to look at it a few times, but if it is a live animal, you don't want to take too much time looking at it, just getting a quick sketch done. So I'm going to leave it just like this, and I'm going to add maybe just that one more mark. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some paint. I have my paints here that I used in the step-by-step, the 7H phthalo blue and the 9H cobalt violet, just in case I need a little extra paint. And I'm going to do this in the same way I did my step-by-step painting. So I'm going to just take just a really light, wet, not too concentrated color. Dab it off of my towel, test it on my paper, and I'm going to cover most of the frog with that, kind of reserving a few places where there are some highlights. So here in the eye, obviously, and I could leave that blank, but I'm going to add it in there right now with a little bit of blue to help me remember. And then I'm just going to go ahead and fill in most of the other spots. And any parts that I want to highlight, I'm just going to make a little circle and outline that area. So this should dry pretty fast because I didn't use a lot of water when I applied it to the paper itself. So I'm dabbing it to see if it's dry, and it seems pretty dry. And when you're out in the field sketching, you want to move kind of quick. In our step-by-step, we went ahead and added in a lot of these really darker areas, kind of lining the frog next. So that's exactly what I'll do. And I also added in the spots. So I'm adding the paint to the darker areas of the frog leg first, and then I'll let the paint run out, or I'll dab it off on my towel and then work it into those lighter areas, reserving some of those spaces. Like here I put a little bit too much color in that space, but that's okay. It still looks like light's reflecting off the leg. I'm going to redefine it a bit. I'm going to be pretty messy with this technique. It's meant to just get an idea of this frog down. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the next darker color. And I'm going to work in these areas that are dry already. And then these should dry by the time I get down to them. I'm going to take this medium color and just kind of paint it in the spaces that are a little darker, as I see in the frog video from the aquarium. Let's start first from that area that is drier, because I don't want to paint on the wet paint, as it would just blend together. Again, I'm reserving some of these white areas as much as I can. And if I accidentally get some paint in there, that's totally fine. Just a sketch. Now the legs, I didn't add any of that color to them. So they're dry now, so I can go ahead and move on to the next color. And I can add a little bit of it. I add some more water to revive my paints that I mixed during the step-by-step. And test it on my paper real quick. I think that'll work. And I'm just going to start with the legs and add that into those darker spots. And so these pads are really dark. And then the edges are pretty dark. And in order to get a little bit of a gradient, I'm going to clean my brush off onto my towel. And then take that clean damp brush and just kind of brush it up. If it's not dark enough, take a little bit more paint and add it in there and let it kind of move up there and create a gradient. And move into that wet spot. And again, this is actually dry already, so I can start working here. And just trying to go quickly, because like I said, if you're out at the aquarium, you're going to want to do this quick, so I want to show you how to do this quickly. Dabbing my brush off because the color here is a little bit lighter. the darker area. I'm gonna dab my brush off on my towel and then just kind of let it move it around a bit into that space to let it create a little bit of a gradient. So adding the color into the dark areas again, dabbing off my brush, and then reworking them a little bit and pushing them into where I want them. Again, adding paint to the dark spaces and letting the paint in my brush run out. Create a bit of a natural gradient into the lighter spaces, or dabbing it on my towel and then working on brushing. It just depends on how dark the paint is. Still, it depends on how much paint pigment was picked up. I'm not worrying about paint running together. This is just a sketch. The mistakes are great. They make it imperfectly perfect. And then I want this a little bit darker. Just gonna roughly put that paint in there. Taking that damp clean brush and just moving that paint around real roughly. It's just a sketch. We're just doing a quick representation, just kind of adding that in without bringing too much where it ends up. So lastly, I'm going to add this violet blue color, add some more water to it to revive it. And then again, with the new color, I'm just gonna work in the dry area. So I'm gonna test this to see if this is dry. So parts of the leg and the body are dry. This part is very wet still, so I need to wait for that to dry. But in the meantime, I can go ahead and start with the head and the eye. As long as I don't dab my hand in the back part of this frog's body. So I'm going to just start there. It's very satisfying to start with the eye, I think. Some people like to do the eye last. I am an eye first kind of person most of the time. Although you may find I'm not always very consistent. I paint based on my mood and on any given day. Be a little bit different. My painting is going to look a little different. I was just adding this to the darkest spots, creating more definition, and I'm just lining it in, so just like drawing in lines with my paintbrush. Now I do need to make sure that the areas are dry before I start adding in the ink lines. Again, most of these areas are dry, and I'm rubbing my hand over it after I dabbed on it, which I probably shouldn't be doing. But I am going to give this just a minute or two to dry, and then I'm going to add the ink. So I'm going to go ahead and start adding ink lines the same way I started with my step-by-step lesson. I'm going to start with the 005 black micro and just add a few lines to define the spaces. This is a thin micron, has a very small tip. And so if there's anything I don't like from this initial pass through, I can redefine it with the thicker micron. So it gives me a chance to start redefining some spaces and some of the lines. I'm also going to go ahead and write in the common name and scientific name. Often I'll do this if I'm out sketching the animal in person. I will do this at the end after I'm done sketching, along with any other observations or thoughts or feelings. And I'm going to skip right to the thicker 08 black micron pen lines. And I'm going to add just a few in there. If I want, I'll go back and add some 01 black micron lines. I'm not even coloring over all of the spots. I'll leave some of them just that blue. Now, you can go ahead and keep working on this, adding more paint and spots and pen and ink lines. But I like the way mine is, so I'm going to leave it there. This is also a great time to add any kind of observations or feelings or any descriptions that you'd like to add about this frog or your time sketching this frog. We're done. Great job observing your world. Thank you for sketching with me today. Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel, and check out majorsketchcrate.com for future lesson crates.